This woman was just at the police station to clean, but she immediately spotted an error in the police investigation. She tossed her lollipop aside, and her mind started racing. In an instant, she realized the police had mistaken the victim for the perpetrator. She crossed out the suspect's label and wrote "victim" underneath. She thought it was just a simple favor, but the next day Tom, who was in charge of the case, flew into a rage. When no one would admit to it, he immediately checked last night's surveillance footage. Jesse's entire cleaning routine had been recorded, but the female supervisor warned that interfering with the case could land her in jail. Jessie looked completely innocent. She was just helping to correct a mistake. How could that be interfering with a criminal case? Tom was furious. He'd been a cop for decades and didn't need some cleaning lady telling him how to do his job. But the female supervisor paid no attention and pulled out the case file, asking Jessie to explain herself. Lucy explained that every piece of furniture in the house was perfectly arranged, and the entire house and hallway were spotlessly clean, indicating the homeowner was a neat person. But strangely, while the curtains were originally tied neatly with rope, the rightmost one was missing a cord, so Lucy deduced that the killer must have used it for something else. There were binding marks on the chair, clearly showing someone had used tape there and then ripped it off, leaving traces. This meant someone had been tied to the chair, but the victim's arms showed no binding marks. Based on these details, there was a third person at the scene. The homeowner was just a victim. This reasoning was flawless. Even the experienced Tom couldn't find fault with it, but he said they'd need to check nearby surveillance to prove there was a third party at the scene. Before he could finish, his subordinate brought news that proved him wrong. The surveillance showed a woman entering the victim's home, confirming there was a third party. However, Jessie had still violated regulations, so Tom ordered his officers to put her in a holding cell. But he wasn't satisfied with this. He had to admit Jessie's reasoning was spot on. They'd have to completely restart the case and quickly find the other victim. Fortunately, they made a discovery in the surveillance near the crime scene. A girl had visited the scene on the day of the incident. Although the girl repeatedly denied it, unfortunately she had no alibi. Just as Tom was about to identify her as the prime suspect, Jessie, who was preparing to sign a confidentiality agreement, took one glance and immediately saw that this footage wasn't from the day of the incident. Tom got irritated just seeing her. They'd finally made some progress on this case, but the female supervisor didn't mind and actually wanted Jessie to point out what was suspicious. It turned out that the wind in the footage should have been blowing from the southeast, but during this season the city's wind blows from the northwest. This footage was clearly from several months ago. As for determining the wind direction in the footage, there was a church behind the girl. Historically, priests would have churches face east so the sun would hang behind them, making them look more godlike. You just had to observe the leaves in the footage to deduce the wind direction. As for what wind was blowing yesterday during the incident, anyone should know that, right? The officers looked at each other, unsure if this was an insult. Jessie didn't care about any of that. She was busy. She immediately turned to leave. However, the female supervisor suddenly called her back.